And so don't bug me anymore, John, until I know what I'm doing. So that's
Stop
what
talking then.
that
That's
is.
not the way to start a show, Tony.
So
All
sorry.
right,
So,
Professor, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, so I've been not out of the loop because I've still been working, but man, I've had a sore throat for like 5 days now, and I'm gonna try not to talk very much. So maybe Jake or Jeff or Tony or Bart, if he's joining us, can jump in with questions.
I just want, hey, excuse me, I want the record to reflect what you just said. You're going to
I
tell
know.
me to stop talking less.
I was
I'm not
actually,
gonna try to
I'm
talk
getting
now.
excited. We're ready for a Jake heavy show. I'm feeling it, and
That
Jeff, Doug. It's
that would be terrific because my throat hurts already just this amount of talking. For 2 days, I didn't even talk to my wife at
Hey,
all.
hey, John, my question is, does your face hurt? Because it's killing me.
wow.
Hey man, this is a harsh show. We haven't even started. Okay, so let's stick on something that we don't want to talk about, Professor. And I want to see if you change your mind. Last Friday, was it last Friday or 2 weeks ago? I think it was last Friday, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I said, should we even talk about Jeffrey Epstein? And you said no. And I go, I agree, and we moved on. That was the entire extent of the conversation. And for the last 7 days, all of America, that's all what anyone, including Trump, can talk about is Epstein. No other business has happened but Epstein. So should we talk about it or not?
No.
I agree. I mean, I posted those guys from Colorado, the cartoon guys. You know, South Park is cool.
Oh, South Park. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're from Colorado, or one of them is at least. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. So that was my extent of talking about the Epstein. Truly, why don't you think we need to talk about it? Everybody's talking about it.
Well, I mean, it's the kind of story I hate because everybody feels like everyone gets to have an opinion about, the Epstein case. And it's one of those things where I don't know. I just don't see any civic purpose to commenting on it. Although Jake said that the South Park episode wasn't funny, and let's hear what I want to hear what Jake has to say about that South Park
Yeah,
episode.
but Jake's kind of stiff. Come on, Jake,
I know,
really?
but let's hear him out. Don't shoot him down
All
yet.
right.
I want to hear why he thought that episode was not funny because I'm more interested in that than the Epstein case.
All right, Jake.
Okay, so I've got my brother and sister-in-law visiting. They're from Aurora, close to you, John.
Yeah.
But anyways, so my brother-in-law is really funny. So we
Hey,
decided to
Jake, I'm in Parker. That makes me closer than John to your Aurora-ness. So I'm glad to hear it. So I just wanted to claim my fame and keep John from talking.
incredible.
Right.
So
How far
anyway,
away from Casa Bonita though is sorry.
But anyways, Casa Bonita aside, yeah, so I don't know, we watched a couple Family Guy episodes together, and then we were just scrolling, and the South Park episode was there, and then it's like, oh, people are talking about this, let's watch it. And the bashed on Trump, which, I support, but they kind of took it over the top, which,
Shocking.
well,
I thought they took it to exactly where they took the I guess the South Park movie. So it reminded me more of the South Park movie than it did the episodes of South Park because because in the South Park movie, I don't know if you know this, but do you remember the movie?
yeah.
Satan's lover is Saddam Hussein. And so they went straight there with Trump as Satan's new lover.
Yeah.
With
and after
equal number of-
Saddam was captured by American forces in Iraq, they showed him the movie.
So what do you think, Jake? Come on, what do you think?
So you didn't laugh or?
I laughed, but I'm like, I don't know. I am really opposed to media just like talking about politics, especially contemporary politics, because it's very depressing. I don't really need movies and shows to tell me about the terrible situation I'm in. I kind of watch media to forget about, the terrible stuff going on in life. Also, it was really weird at the end of the episode when, South Park capitulates to Trump and they say, oh, we'll air a pro-Trump PSA video. And it was an AI generated video of Trump, like a real Trump walking through the desert naked. And it's like, okay, this is
Can't
kind
get
of,
much better than this, Jake. Come on.
Well,
it can get much
Emperor,
better
they
than
actually
this.
were making a comment on the Emperor has no clothes. It was that's what they were trying to do, was comment on that, Jake. That's all.
Well,
so let me
I understand that. It's just, I mean, I know people are saying like, oh yeah, South Park is sticking it to Trump, and the White House has responded, obviously. And then like it was yesterday, so the day after the episode premiered, the FCC approved the merger of Paramount and like CBS. So whatever. But like, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of media critiquing politics for me, because I'm not a fan of, media, actors, etc., giving their political opinions, because they're really good actors that I really like. But as soon as I hear their political opinions, then I'm like, well, I don't care. You're super rich. Why should I care about your opinion?
I
well, let
Okay.
me
I agree
well,
100% with you, Jake, on this issue. It's like, because you're famous, why should we care about your opinion? And by famous, like actors or whatever, if you were famous as a politician, I might care, or a civic leader or whatever, but why do I care? And why Trump Trump is the end result of such things, because he ran a TV show and now he's president.
So,
yeah,
gentlemen, it kind of cracks me up that Jake, who is the fact checker for a podcast talking about history and cultural political events, doesn't like a commentary on cultural and political events. So anyway,
John,
let's
that is slander. I am more than just a fact checker. I am a high school history teacher.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank
This is my side gig.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to dock your pay for your criticism. So, Professor,
yeah.
I brought it up intentionally just because the topic today is the history of free speech, free press, association, assembly, some pretty important constitutional rights. You have some pretty instructive insights on positive liberties and negative liberties and what we should be thinking about as Americans. Clearly, the president has some opinions on this as well. He has some really strong opinions on media and fame and anyone using their voice. As long as they're critiquing him, he has a strong opinion against it. So in today's world, I have all sorts of friends who are just constantly fearful of what they say because they're worried about being sent to Guantanamo or something. And I'm not talking about immigration, I'm talking about US citizens. And they're just really paranoid. And it's not just the president, it's the social media, hammer. It's the cancel culture. There's all sorts of reasons to hold your tongue. For some reason, in the last 5 years, you and I have decided not to hold our tongue, and we talk about almost anything under the sun. But what I'd like, though, is to have some guidance from you, a bigger picture, how to put this in a structure, free speech and press, association, assembly. Has it changed, or has it always been this way? Do we always have this vitriol? Is there anonymous Twitter bots, or is the Federalist Papers? I mean, who wrote those? And I mean, do you always have to have a name associated? I mean, this big picture stuff. It seems like it's getting worse, or is it? So, if you could just kind of take us through our Constitution on those four rights, on whatever you think is important historically of where we are, and give us some history to put us in context. The show is yours.
Well, I'll have Jake pull up a document for me if you can find it. There's a speech that Frederick Douglass gave, where I think you can probably find it by just Googling Frederick Douglass free speech. And then the metaphor he uses is that there is a ship of state. And in order to explain uh, the slaveholders' rebellion, um, he says, well, who gets on this ship of state? And when the people who supported slavery signed on to our national government, they were signing on to a freedom document, and they knew that they had to take their chances with um, in a free speech environment against what Douglas called national enlightenment. That they were going to have to prove their arguments in a free speech environment. And he says that does not excuse them from their attempt to lay piratical hands on the ship of state. They're committing a mutiny when they reject the idea of free speech and national enlightenment. As for how has this changed? Well, it's changed in the method in which we get. Um,
Hey, Professor, hold on one second.
sorry.
Um, that was a really you're giving new territory for me. I'm not familiar with that speech by Frederick Douglass, and you're talking about freedom of speech. That slave owners didn't like freedom of speech.
Yeah, because almost every slave state put into their state law, and they wanted to put into territorial laws, laws restricting free speech. You could not speak in favor of abolition or against slavery.
Does
That
that
was
surprise you that I've never heard of this?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe because
Huh,
it seems like it would have come up at some point. But yeah,
never heard of it.
the Lecompton Constitution of Kansas specifically prohibited anyone from advocating an end to slavery, and that proposed phony, fake, rebel created state government actually prohibited free speech in
I've
there.
never heard of this. This is fascinating. I'm really glad we're having this show. So you're saying you went right to Frederick Douglass and this point to give us context on where we are today. What's the link?
Well, I guess I was setting the stage that we have and have always had an assumption within our foundational documents that free speech is the natural state, that it is natural and normal for us to be able to express our views, that we should have freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and so many of our other rights are derived uh, uh, from those rights.
How
Uh,
how new is that?
how new is what?
The Bill of Rights when it was incorporated. Was that most countries around the world had all those rights? Citizens could do that in their country.
No, 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 nothing. At least nothing I can think of. There was no recognition. We were the first to incorporate those rights, as far as I know. I mean, there's always some, somebody will point to something on the Isle of Man or something, but but the,
Uh, it's a revolutionary concept that's inherent in what it means to be an American. If you believe in free speech and free press and freedom of assembly, association, that just seems American.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And I had no idea about the slave states arguing against that inherently American philosophy. Surely that's news to me. So keep going. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and so as far as like the environment of coarse free speech or commentary on politics, that's been around forever. That predates even our national government. That was going on in the colonies. So that when the government of the United States was founded, it was in a way culturally and legally incorporated into the national documents because it was something that had already developed in the colonies over the previous 150 years. It was sort of all accepted, and the political commentary. We tend to focus on the high-minded political commentary of the founders, but it wasn't always high-minded among the founders, and most of the political commentary was not that good, and much of it was coarse. I mean, one of the interesting things, about a revered figure like, say, Abraham Lincoln is that a deeper linguistic analysis of his writings shows that he was writing anonymous letters to the newspaper when he was young, insulting and attacking his political opponents. And he was, making insinuations about their sexuality and their masculinity and, stuff like that. And he was doing it all in anonymous letters that he was sending to newspapers. So,
This is news to me too. This is a good history show. Really?
yeah, I mean, people, well, I mean, you were a political uh, hack for a while. I don't know if you ever did this, but I'll admit to something else that I used to do back in the day is that I was often the go-to letter writer. In other words, the party would tell me we need letters on this issue, and I would sit down and I would write, I don't know, as many of them as I could, uh, because you wanted them all to be authentic and have a different voice and all this stuff. And then, give them to different party members to like mail to media outlets, that sort of thing. I don't know if
Going
you
on today.
did you ever
Still
do
have.
anything like that? Yeah. Yeah. Because as you know, everybody ignores a form letter, but they'll actually take it seriously if it's a real letter coming from a real constituent. So you wanted to get as many real letters as possible into a constituent, into the hands of a constituent. So, yeah. As for, to bring it up to date, I think it's interesting that something Jake said, just as an aside, where he said, obviously the White House responded. I do think that it's worth noting that the White House did respond to what South Park did, and that it's not obvious that any previous White House would have responded. I mean, that's something that maybe Obama, I mean, that was kind of Obama's big innovation, was to participate in pop culture, but pre-Obama, I mean, Bill Clinton a little bit, but in a way, during the George W. Bush administration, we had a return to a president who wouldn't probably respond that much to something that was going on in pop culture. So it is, and what's relatively recent is the idea that the president of the United States would respond to um, something like this in the popular culture. I think that's new. As far as, I don't know if you want me to address cancel culture, and that was another question that you asked.
We might get there. That's not critical for now. But we might get there though. What else do you? Anything else in an overview that you want to tell us?
Oh, I mean, if I'm taking your question correctly, it's important to understand that we have time, place, and manner restrictions on free speech, and all rights are negotiated peacefully within a political process. So no single right is absolute. But the First Amendment tends to be one of those parts of the Constitution where the thumb's on the scale a little bit. We really do try to favor free speech, press, and assembly in most things. I don't know if that's going to continue into the future, but that has been the trend over, say, the last 100 years or so.
I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, you're a historian, but isn't it not true that the highest protected speech in all of America is political speech?
Well, it's supposed to be. I mean, up until McCain-Feingold, that
Fair.
was. I mean, and that's always been my problem with campaign finance reform, is that it put a limit only on political speech, and that Citizens United didn't go far enough in repealing all of the restrictions on political speech.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the
especially when
White
it comes to
House.
the parties. I mean,
Yeah,
it
right.
in essence, the Supreme Court has rolled back almost everything that it isn't about the parties, but I still find it strange how regulated political parties are.
And I think there's going to be a case up to the Supreme Court on that specific issue as well next year, right?
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if Bart or Jeff, not Doug, want to weigh in on this. Would you? I'd be interested in hearing their uh, if they think that my characterization that there's you know, a thumb on the scale in favor of free speech over the past 100 years. Does that
Oh
sound,
God, the lawyers are going to weigh in. Jump in, gentlemen.
Bart or Jeff?
Jeff. Do you want to lead off, or do you want me to?
You're already speaking, Bert.
Okay, since I've already opened it up, although you can't see me very well. Yeah, I've not. It's funny. For some reason, I thought a lot about freedom of speech and all that stuff, but I haven't quite looked at it the way Stephen is characterizing it. There's been kind of an effort to curtail speech, I guess, in the latter part of it, well, into the 20th century and even now. And thinking about it, I totally agree. I don't know if I'd characterize limits on, I don't know, political campaign donations as curbing speech. That's just my own personal thing. I don't know if that, I know a lot of people disagree with that. The Supreme Court, I think, has tried to roll back some of these restrictions in the last few years anyway. And my guess is if cases go up or, get to the Supreme Court on limitations on campaign contributions or political parties or that kind of thing, and what they can do, I would think this Supreme Court would not be particularly receptive to arguments in favor of all of that stuff. I know I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of talking in code words here, but this court just generally doesn't like that stuff. So I would think arguments against that would really be received pretty well.
Yeah, yep. I don't have a problem with any of that. I think that, and I do understand that the federal government has the right to regulate corporations. We use this word corporation all the time, but it really just means like a group of people, and groups of people when they are acting corporately, when they are subject to regulation. And I think the Supreme Court isn't going whole hog after McCain-Feingold simply because they are very deferential to Congress. This Supreme Court is deferential to Congress, and they want Congress to fix it themselves, I think. But there is something. There's something a little bit icky or weird about the level of control that both the state and the federal government has over entities that exist for political purposes that they don't have over any other group of people on earth. It seems like the rules should be the same, at least. Why? I mean, maybe it's the unfairness of it, but like, why can Ford Motor Company elect its own officers, but without too much interference from the state, but the Republican Party can't? Why is it that the political parties have to have their elections so tightly regulated? Why the funding contribution? It's just bizarre how much regulation we have of political parties that we don't have over anybody else. I mean, you just have to not claim to be the Republican or the Democratic Party. So anyway, but generally speaking, I always say, like, set that aside, the big regulation of political parties. And when it comes to rights of individuals and groups other than political parties, over the last 100 years, it seems like the various Supreme Courts have been pretty good on expanding free speech rights.
So,
Jeff?
Professor, I'd like
Oh,
to
I just
keep
wanted to.
I'd like to keep it broad. I'd like to go broader than our current conversation. But before we do that, Jeff, jump in.
There were two aspects that I wanted to react to. First, I don't agree with the Supreme Court's position that money is speech. I also don't agree that it's a bad thing that it gets regulated, and here's why. And this kind of goes back to what Jake was saying. Jake, you don't like it when celebrities who have a large pulpit, right? They have an ability to get their message out that most of us don't have. And you don't like it when they speak their mind on political topics. I had exactly that reaction when the Dixie Chicks put out their song criticizing President Bush a long time ago, and I've revisited that a lot, but I'm going to draw the parallel here. That's the same thing as corporations or people with billions of dollars being able to spend endlessly to get their message out. They have a bigger pulpit than any of the rest of us. And so you have to be consistent. You either let everybody say whatever they want to say, as for want of a better characterization, as loudly as they can say it, meaning as, with as much money as they want, or you have to constrain both of those. So that's one general thought. But overall, I agree with the premise that of all of the rights that were reserved to individuals, the free speech, free press, free assembly rights are carefully constrained, and there is a very sophisticated 3-tier level of analysis that the Supreme Court will do to try to figure out whether they can constrain somebody's speech. If I'm thinking about that, and Professor Tootle, maybe you have a thought on this, as I think about all the other rights, they're sort of preservative of an individual's rights of liberty against the government, but the First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly, you could almost characterize as preservative of everybody's rights. So my right to hear what you think, rather than it just being my right to be able to say what I want. What are your thoughts on that characterization of why it's treated differently?
Well, it's part of a longer conversation. And I guess I have to quote my second favorite historian, who's me. And I put a link in the show notes to an article that I wrote a while back on Madison and property rights and what the relate. And rather than, I made the joke that it's about me, but really it's about Madison. So Madison, author of the Constitution and supporter of the First Amendment. And one of the things that I thought was a really interesting insight that Madison had, which was what's the relationship between property and the individual? Now, the Supreme Court, I don't think, ever said that money is speech. But what they said is in keeping with what Madison said, which is there is a relationship between property and the individual. And I'm going to just read what I wrote and then I'll try to explain it. But Madison conceived of property rights in a way that was much broader, deeper, and more expansive than the mere protection of wealth or land. Understanding his conception is central to understanding the very nature of the American government. Because unlike later thinkers, Madison and the other founders did not consider property rights to be something that was separate or apart or something that was held socially or something that was distinct from the rights of an individual. But what that means, if you're just going to have to follow me here as I go down this rather difficult rabbit hole. If property rights are natural to all other things, things like free markets, things like industry, things like innovation, things like competition, These are all the consequences of our founding principles, not the purpose. So this is important for understanding that our government was not founded to create free markets. Free markets are the result of the principles. The principles come first. And then the other implication for the individual is that the same set of individual rights have both a private and a public function. So he understood that every right that an individual holds has a manifestation in the physical world. So you can't say, I have the right to free speech, you just can't stand anywhere. I have the right to free speech, you just can't own paper. In other words, you have to protect property rights because every single right that you are said to have has something, it has some part of it that exists in the physical world. So that's why you have to protect property rights. And that's what the Supreme Court said, that no matter what right you claim to have, every right you have exists in the real world. And because it exists in the real world, it has a relationship to property or physical things. If you don't like the word property, you hate capitalism, just it's just your rights have a relationship to the physical world. To pretend that and now I'll go back to quoting myself again, to pretend that our system of government could function without the protection of property rights would have seemed oxymoronic and absurd to the framers of our political institutions. The rights that we have both a private and a public function. Anyway, every right lived and breathed in its relationship to the physical world. Every right that you have lives and breathes in its relationship to the physical world. And again, call it property, whatever. If you don't like I'm replacing the word property, which is in my essay, with the word physical world, just to be less, I don't know, maybe if that's a stumbling block for some people. But then that's not enough. Because individuals exercise property rights in a social context, they depend on the reciprocal peaceful recognition within a political system. And a just system protects the rights of every individual. And here's what Madison wrote: property embraces everything to which a many may attach a value and have a right, which leaves to everyone else the like advantage. Which means that any right that you have and anything that you find valuable, that's property. And because everyone has rights, everyone has property worthy of protection. So property is not just money, it's not wealth, it's not land, it's not objects. You can't claim to have free opinions or be free from violence if somebody is messing with you while you're communicating your ideas. And one could not freely express religious belief and practice when your personal safety and property were threatened. The freedom to choose where to work, what to work for, what to do with the product of one's work, all these things are inseparable. All of them are rights. And to Madison, any pretended choice between the rights of property and any other right was a false dichotomy. This is a thing that like socialists and some liberals and some leftists do all the time, is they pretend like it's a choice. You must choose between protecting property and Madison's like, no, that's a false choice. The rights of property are inextricably linked to every other right and should be recognized and balanced in a peaceful constitutional order. Madison said, a man is said to have rights and property. He may be equally said to have property in his rights. And so if you have a government that violates religious liberty with tests and taxes, any sort of hierarchy is not just. That's why Madison said that the most sacred of all rights are the rights of property, but it's not because it's not for the rights of the rich person to get rich and keep, keep things, but it's because every single one of your rights has to exist in the physical world. Um, anyway, I know that I went a little bit far afield in this, but
Yeah, but
I
it's still
feel like it's an important foundational
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, well, and it does get to the heart of all the matter, doesn't it? I mean, when the president says that he's going to keep a law firm from being able to practice law, or
yep.
a major newspaper or a television show from showing specific content, or a comedian from saying what they want to say. I mean, it's a really foundational structure that you've laid. That it's not just
Yep.
free speech; it's the ability to be an American, to be a human.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the context of which I was quoting Frederick Douglass. Like, I'm trying to get to get everybody to understand just how foundational this is. That it has to be natural. I mean, and if you're a conservative, you've probably experienced the other end of this, and it should be familiar to you. The fact that no registered Republicans teach anthropology in college is like the result of decades of discrimination. You know, uh, and when I first thought of people not being able to be open about their political beliefs, I thought about every single conservative I knew in academics. None of them could ever come out. Um, there was a historian, Mac Owens, who, every time a conservative got tenure, he would say, "Well, now you can raise the pirate flag." Like in other words, they can't fire you now. But yeah, it should be shocking and horrifying. Um, and I guess I've been thinking about this. I don't know how far we want to go on this, but one of the things I was thinking about as I was swimming is, this morning is Donald Trump he's a liberal. I mean, he's a progressive. This is the stuff that liberals and progressives did. We're going to get cute with the law. We're going to find some sort of, I mean, he's doing it in the dumbest, in a dumb way, in that he's not looking for the justification first. His administration just does stuff, and then later tries to find a legal justification for it. Whereas, but and you say, well, that's really bad. Yes, it's bad, but it was also pretty bad when the Obama and the Biden administrations would would say, well, we want to do this thing, go find a legal justification for it, and then we're going to do it. And yes, it's not as bad because it still preserves the I don't know, the whiff of rule of law, but it's all pretty bad. The I was reminded of that Supreme Court case where the state of New York uh, sent out letters to all these banks and said, well, just to let you know, we're going to look into your finances if you do business with the NRA, and that's that's the government going after somebody for their free speech, and it was
The
bad.
same, but Professor, the same thing with anti-DEI, right? If the federal government is making sure that private institutions across America don't have any DEI policies, it's the same thing, right? It's bad.
Well, it just depends because the federal government does. I mean, this is the eternal problem of the existence of the Declaration of Independence and the 14th Amendment, which is
Mhm.
that the federal government the does have the right to enforce non-discrimination. So going after everything in the world called DEI would be illegal, but uh, enforcing laws uh, that that preserve equality would be within the purview of the federal government. So
I love your distinction, and I think it's a really important distinction, and I concur with it. But you must admit the Trump administration is saying anything with DEI, anything, it doesn't matter. Anything is off the table, or otherwise we're going to withhold federal funding.
yeah, I don't know that there's any you know, logical or legal test for anything that they're doing. And the other thing is that, and you see this so often, is of course I don't trust them. You know, their position is not I'm going to enforce equality. It's I'm going to impose this. I'm going to impose a different thing. You know, like it's supposed to be viewpoint neutral in its consequence, not.
They would articulate it like you did, I'd be in favor of it. But you're right. They say garbage and go after their enemies. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's and again, the firing of all these U.S. attorneys is just bizarre. I have no idea what the legal. I mean, the legal I shouldn't say that. I know that they have issued a memo saying what their legal justification is. That doesn't mean it's right or that it isn't bizarre. But I shouldn't say I don't know what their legal justification is. But it just seems like somebody made it up on the back of a napkin, you know, after they did whatever they were going to do.
Yeah. Okay. Before I ask another thrust of questions, Jake, Bart, Anthony.
I want to get back to one other point about South Park, though. Which,
okay, go ahead.
Because what Jake said, because I think there are some parameters that I bet we could get Jake and Jeff and maybe John to get and to get within, which is I don't like it when you know, celebrities you know, deliver political messages. Yeah, who cares? But I put it into a giant bucket of like, who cares? What is annoying is this thing that that I can't. I don't know if it was either Seth Meyers or Tina Fey called clapter, which is making a lazy joke that you know that your audience is going to clap and laugh at because they agree with you politically. And I wish I knew if that was Jake can look this up. Who invented the term clapter? If it was Tina Fey or yeah, but they knew, you know, their Saturday Night Live, they could, you know, always make a liberal joke and they could always get that New York audience to engage in clapter but the greatest comedians are the ones who challenge their audiences, which is why I asked Jake the only question that matters. You know, he said he disagreed with that the South Park episode was bad, right? I'm not sure how did you say it was bad or that you didn't like it, right? But then I asked the only question that matters, which is, did you laugh? Because if you laughed, even though you didn't want to, then that was a good comedian challenging the audience, you know. And I make a distinction between anybody, and I think there's a difference between somebody who's challenging their audience and you laugh in spite of yourself because there's some sort of truth that you didn't want to see or admit that caught you off guard.
Professor, I like your argument, but I think you're wrong. And let me give you some proof. The two biggest. No, hold on, Jake. Hold on. Now you can. You know, this is the two biggest arguments or the two biggest laugh lines of the whole South Park episode were body shaming things on the size of an appendage of the president, which may or may not be true. I don't want to know. So, I mean, that's a cheap clapter to your point. That's not some deep, insightful joke. It's just some base, crass thing of humanity. I get it. I'm human. I may have even laughed, but still, it's not sophisticated humor. Agree or disagree?
Me or Jake?
I don't care.
Let's go Jake first.
All right.
Well, I wasn't going to comment on that. I didn't. Well, John, sorry, Tootle asked me a question and then you just kind of interjected.
I
Okay.
So,
know. That's the privilege, great privilege of being a facilitator. Go ahead.
uh-huh, uh-huh. I think so, Tootle, I think me watching the South Park episode, I didn't go in blind. I had already seen clips of it on Twitter. That's why I watched it, because I don't really watch South Park. I've watched some clips before. I watched the L. Ron Hubbard episode with Scientology, but like, so I wasn't going in blind. So I had already seen what Trump looked like and how they were portraying him and certain appendages and whatnot. I will say, I think the most accurate part of the episode that they portrayed was when when the city of South Park is complaining, and then Trump threatens to sue them, and then the residents start freaking out, and they're like, most of us voted for him. Why is he doing this to us? And then ultimately, what they learn is, well, the president doesn't care about people who voted for him so long as they're not benefiting him. If you are not a benefit to Trump, he will throw you under the bus. So I think that's one of the most real things that they portrayed in the episode.
Yeah, and I think that you should, dismiss the South Park guys at your own peril. They are and have been very consistent libertarians for their entire career. Like, and I again, I don't condone or even know about most of their political stances on any issue. I don't, but I will say this: every time I've ever checked in on them, they have been consistent.
And I would like to interject one thing here, Jake. What I would encourage you to do is watch. These guys made a musical called Hannibal the Musical, and I think you would really appreciate it. It's a really great piece of it's a spoofy musical about the people that ate each other, like because it was that party that died, whatever, the
The Donner
Donner
The
Party.
Donner
Party.
Party.
Yeah, so it's partially based on that, but it's called
Oh my
Hannibal the
gosh.
Musical, and
Tony, I thought you were going to recommend the Book of Mormon musical, and I was going to laugh.
which is also really good too. But the other thing I want you to know, it's a little bit more practical minded. They bought Casa Bonita, and they actually, being libertarian or whatever, they just recently had an issue. The gorillas and the divers all went on strike, and uh, these two guys, who run, they own this business, they actually were at odds with labor rights, and we're like, hey, dude, who are you people? What do you mean? You don't think they deserve to have a union? They were unionizing, and Trey and whoever sent out to the employees, seemingly, non-political, but basically threatening them if they unionized, that they would fire them. And I was like, hey, man, that's not very good. It doesn't look very good on you guys. So
Yeah, but it does seem like something libertarians would do.
that's
Uh,
true. Yep. Yep.
Yep.
but I do think that there's a value in artists pushing the envelope, and that's but as
Yeah,
for whether it's great art or something.
Professor, pushing the envelope, they had Jesus being threatened by Trump, supposedly, and Jesus is having to whisper. I mean, come
Yeah,
on, that's pushing the envelope.
yeah, yeah,
Huh.
John, what do you
All
mean
right.
supposedly? Did you watch the episode or not?
yeah,
Who, me?
Yeah, you. You're the only John here.
Of
yeah,
course I did.
yeah,
Then
yeah,
what do you mean supposedly? They flat out say in the episode, Jesus says, "I'm being threatened by Trump right
yeah,
now."
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not supposedly. He's
yeah,
whispering because he is being threatened.
Well,
yeah.
that's my point is that's as much as you can push in American society. That's
Yeah,
beyond.
they are artists at the edge, and
Okay. All right, we're on the same page again. All right, I've got a quick aside question. Then we'll go back to Jeff. Professor, is it possible? And I really want to know I forget the name of the papers. I don't actually. But when we were founded, there was anonymous papers, and there was also papers I think published by citizens. They weren't necessarily elite, but I'm not positive on that point. But it seems like today almost anybody is a member of the press, isn't it? I mean, like if I say something weird enough or edgy enough or connecting two different issues enough, it literally can go viral and millions of people can see it and be responding to it. And I don't have to have any money or any fame or any reputation until I do that nexus that no one else saw before. That wasn't true in the history of the human race before. You used to need to be a king, didn't you, in order to get widespread. You couldn't just be a crazy person, could you? And just go out in the town square and start squealing stuff. This is a new change in technology, isn't it not?
No, but I mean, it gets back to why Hamilton was so clear about the relationship between your freedoms and property, is that if everything is owned by the king, there's no place where you are free. And the development of cities, which had charters, I mean, if you go back to medieval Europe, like the city air makes you free because the kings would grant, cities and people who lived in them certain rights, but they were granted by the king. And the United States just has none of that. We have none of that feudal past that dictates that no, your freedoms are well. I mean, it's like the Declaration says, your freedoms are unalienable. They can never be made foreign to you, no matter where you are or where you go.
Okay. But do you agree we have more power as citizens today than we have in any other time throughout history?
More power as citizens.
Potential. I guess it's not pure power, but potential power. More opportunity.
Yes, I think that's still fair. Yeah, I think more people have more rights realized than at any other point in our past.
Okay, so we really shouldn't be worried about the federal government's intrusion in press
No, you
and
should be worried about it because all these things are fragile. I mean, and here's the other thing. I was thinking about this on the drive back. This is just what goes through my mind when I'm swimming. We got all these conservatives feel so self-confident in the future of freedom because of the current makeup of the Supreme Court. But, you know, a lot of those people rose up because they were the opposition and they had to be better than everybody else in order to get their jobs. And if you keep promoting a bunch of dummies, uh, you're gonna lose a lot of legal arguments in the future. So it's not in your long-term best interest to um, be dumb, and it's not in your long-term best interest to not teach the next generation of people um, about constitutional rights. That's for sure.
okay, but practically this year, do we have any concerns about freedom of speech?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you should, I mean, the stuff that the Trump administration is doing in virtually every department of the federal government is concerning because they don't seem to care about whether what they're doing is legal, constitutional, or right. It's what they want to do. And so anybody who falls within their spotlight should be worried.
And Professor, why aren't you worried? I think I've asked that before, and I wasn't satisfied with your answer. It's not tenure. I mean, it's why aren't you worried about your ability to speak against the administration? Aren't you worried about whatever long arm of the federal government could do something to you?
I guess it's my insignificance. If I were,
You are the lead person on Tootle Talks.
yeah, yeah. If and also, I guess I understand. Here you go. If this makes you feel better, I also have a union. Like I know that any attempt to fire me is gonna that my union has lawyers.
You
Uh,
see, now that's a conservative statement. Thank you for that. You can bring both sides together on that one.
yeah, that it isn't so much my tenure. I guess I would be more worried if I thought that my union would not protect me because of, which I guess they have done in California. Maybe I should be more worried. But um,
But law firms are crumbling. Major media is crumbling. Billionaires seem to crumble. Why would a union not crumble?
well, I also think, um, and the existence of a group like FIRE also gives me hope, because FIRE and the Alliance Defending Freedom and these Pacific Legal Foundation, places like that. Um, if I were fired for saying something, about Trump or something, um, one of those groups would take up my suit, and yeah, they could ruin me financially in the meantime, but yeah, I'd just move in with you, John, I guess. I don't
All
know.
right, fair enough. And that's a nice offer. It's a
Could
good
just
definition.
couch surf between Bart and Tony and you, and get through the next year or so.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Jeff, this is a topic I know that's near and dear to your heart. It is not a legal show, so you're going to have to translate any concepts or questions from a lawyer to layman's terms. But what questions do you have of Professor Tootle about freedom of speech?
I don't know that I have an additional one right now. I sort of asked what I was interested in.
But really? I mean, you don't have
Well, how
concern.
about this, Jeff? Were you satisfied with my answer? Or did you want to go deeper on anything I said?
Oh, I have to admit, I had not had enough coffee. I felt like I was trying to
Yeah.
read a Stephen Hawking book about understanding black holes. So I
Yeah.
want to go back and read Madison and give
But
that some more thought. But
wait,
I
I'm going to tee you up then. New York Times versus Sullivan. We both studied it in law school. There's probably going to be a change, and I don't know. You probably never read that, Professor Tootle, but Jeff can translate it easy enough. Isn't there probably going to be a substantive change in free speech in America within the next 2 or 3 years? Jeff,
what sort of change?
limiting the ability to critique the president.
How would that change come about? Like a Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, probably executive action, then Supreme Court decision upholding that. Did you? Probably that's my real fear on freedom of speech. Do you disagree?
I do.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Good.
I actually I watch everything the Supreme Court does now, and I pay attention and I read the decisions and the dissents to the extent we get decisions. Most of the really compelling things seem to happen on the shadow docket, so you don't get the benefit of that. But and there will be people that will be angry at this, but I have more faith in at least 2, maybe 3 of the justices than I think people give them credit for. There's, in my mind, a question of whether they are too, and this goes back to one of our other Tootle talks, whether they are too beholden to the old way of thinking of the court as being just a decider of particular issues and not weighing into a larger political question. But in the end, I think when faced with something that is just blatantly un-American, and I'll give as an example the birthright citizenship. All of the news press wanted to get a lot of attention by saying, oh my gosh, birthright citizenship is at an end based on the decision, but that's not what they said. And I'm 98% sure that when it comes back around, the Supreme Court will say, nope, the Constitution says what it says, and you can't undo that. And I think that is also true of the First Amendment rights of assembly and free speech and of the press, that they won't be willing to do anything more than nibble around the edges, which is what has been done throughout our history.
Nibbling around
obscenity and commercial speech, and there's lots of things that are not protected speech, but so far, for the most part, political speech setting aside Professor Tootle's view of the money versus speech question, generally political speech has been left alone.
Jeff,
I think
Jeff,
the
you're
court
saying
would.
that law firms across America are stopping doing what they're doing and having to pay a presidential library off when major media is being shut down. You can say we're not going to approve a merger unless you do some action. You don't think that's happening? That's not nibbling around the edges.
Well, that's why I asked you what you said about, how was it going to happen? Your free speech rights as a practical matter change every day with every action of the administration. Do they legally change? No, not until the Supreme Court has done something or Congress has passed something. Even an executive order doesn't really change them because it's immediately contested and it should have been blocked by a nationwide injunction, but now we'll just have class actions instead of nationwide injunctions.
Mm-hmm. You're not worried.
I'm absolute of all things that are happening right now, that's the one I'm most worried about. But that's good because that means that the more people that are vigilant about their First Amendment rights to speak, the better we're going to be able to defend them. But we have to draw a distinction between things like the market forces, which is mostly what you guys were talking about when you're talking about, did you laugh at South Park? South Park ought to be able to say whatever they can get their audience to laugh at. The government shouldn't have an ability to stop that. And at the point where they go too far, which I haven't seen it and I need somebody to tell me how I can see it if I don't have cable. But
all right, let me give you one more, Jeff, and then we're going back to Tootle.
Okay.
I want to hear Bart too, because
okay, we'll go. Well, one more for Jeff, then Bart, and then Tootle. So Jeff, you don't believe that they shut down PBS, federal funding for PBS and NPR because of political speech with the bias, and I think there is a bias, a liberal bias in both of those entities. You don't believe it's all about speech? They don't like the speech.
I believe it is, but there's a difference between constraining speech and paying for it, right? I mean, you know as well as I do that Congress's power of the purse is incredibly broad, and what they're willing to spend taxpayer dollars on is different than what speech they can legally constrain.
Okay, good distinction. I'll accept that. Going to Bart.
But I do want somebody, and maybe as an aside, I do want somebody to educate me on the liberal bias. I had that conversation on one of your threads with NJ, and would like to know more.
It is clear as day that NPR has a liberal bias. I can show it to you every single day.
Good.
Well, there's a good article recently in the Free Press about it, and Jake can find it. Yeah, Jake can find it and put it in the show notes. It just came out, and it was a nice sort of summary of maybe the underlying problem of NPR. PBS.
Yeah, cool. And Jeff, I listen to NPR. I like NPR. I listen to it a couple hours every day, and have for years. I like it, but it's crazy liberal. But I still like it. Okay. You wanted to go to Bart.
Bart, yeah.
Yeah. Let me just weigh in on some of the legal stuff that you guys were just talking about, because I think this is really cool. Stephen, thank you for quoting from your article that that you quoted from. And I've got a reason for saying this. I read that article about a year ago, maybe, because you had talked about it for another reason. And I read it for the other reason, which is that James Madison was probably talking about property rights as more than just like, a pen or a house or something. But the reason I wanted to thank you for doing that today is because there's something that's kind of being lost, I think, in the legal discussions that are going on today about a lot of our constitutional rights. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that these rights have like a place in the real world.
Yep.
And like the thing people
keep Madison's saying, insight. I'm just explaining Madison, but that.
Oh, I know. But you said that here this morning, and and I think it's really important for people to understand that, because right now, like, in my real job, in my world, I represent library districts, okay, here in Colorado.
Yeah.
One of the arguments I keep hearing people make is, oh, everyone has First Amendment rights, but you got to take all these books out of the library because there isn't a right to like read the book. And I keep thinking to myself, okay, I understand you don't like the content of the book, but if you don't like the content of the book, don't read it. Because I think you can't have a freedom of speech and freedom of the press and everything if there's also not some kind of a right to actually read that information or hear it. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So that's a perfect example. And we're talking about the history of free speech and everything. It's like there is all of the rights that are in the Constitution. We all have a right to those things in the real world,
Yes.
whatever that means.
Right. Well, what it means is that, that under a system of pluralism, that that these are all being peacefully negotiated. I feel like that was another just really keen insight that the founders had, and that it also explains why our system is so frustrating and why every form of totalitarianism is so tempting, is that totalitarianism gives you the answer.
Right.
You get to say, "Oh, I've got the answer, and we can fix this." And pluralism just says, "No, I'm sorry. We have many principles that are all going to be imperfectly balanced again today." Right here in the real world. It's why I sometimes I have my own bones to pick with many progressive and intellectuals, but I always say that don't immediately dismiss all forms of American pragmatism, because I do think that one of the great parts about the broader liberal tradition, not the big L, Franklin Roosevelt version, but the broader, let's call it Enlightenment, just the broader Enlightenment tradition, is that it says, okay, we're going to say these things, but every now and then we're going to check in with it. We're going to check in with the real world and see if this is actually true. That, and I thought that was there's an unconfirmed. No, I guess I've read this story in more than one place, but Ronald Reagan used to have this thing where he said, "I want to travel with the Soviet leader in a helicopter over the United States and just have the Soviet premier like point at a house, and we'll just land the helicopter and see how that person lives." And that would be a real world check to see, like, how are people living? And I love that even in a practical politician in the year 1980, there's this echo of this very old principle from the founders that says that your rights need to be connected to reality. You can't just, another old joke from this great, horrible comedy called Club Paradise, with Robin Williams and Twiggy and Jimmy Cliff, where Robin Williams makes this little joke in the middle of it. I thought, oh, that's a really good joke, which is he asked, "Don't they have a constitution?" He says, "Yes, but it's written in pencil." And that it doesn't matter how good your constitution is; it matters if you follow it. And that's another thing that John has harped on for all these many years, and we have as well. Is like that's what rule of law is. Not just do you proclaim that these rights are they, but what do they? How do they live? How do they breathe? How do they exist in the real world?
Lovely. Lovely. Thank you. Hey, Sandon, I think we need to give you an opportunity to jump in before we kind of wrap things up for today. You don't have to ask a question, but now's your opportunity.
I am busily editing my resume to send it to someone. So I have just been listening to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Tony, you've been quiet and respectful, which is unusual for our producer.
Yeah.
After listening to this for another hour, what are your conclusions or questions,
Yeah.
concerns?
Yeah. In an effort to uh, not talk about the Epstein files, I'd like to put great kind of uh, good vibes the way of these Republicans who have voted that the full Epstein files be released, to include Tom Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, Tim Burchett, Eric Burleson, Jeff Van Drew, Eli Crane, Corey Mills, Tom Barrett, and Max Miller. These are fucking Americans, is what they fucking are.
Okay, now two things. We've never had a list of Republicans like this on the show before, and watch the curse words. We're gonna get. We got to self-censor, otherwise we won't be on the Family Channel.
Look,
So,
I have a mental health disease, so I can't be held responsible for
Love it.
hey, okay, get ready to rip into me, all four of you, five of you. I disagree, Professor. Before we get into the legal stuff, I'm not sure it's wise to have the power, the investigatory power of the federal government to look into citizens and organizations, decide there's not enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt to prosecute, to then hold these files and then later release them to the public because the public's demanding it. I think we're on dangerous territory by demanding um, private investigative files to be released. There may be some notable exceptions why we do so, but I'm not sure we want this precedent. Am I wrong?
Well, as a historian, I always say, well, I want it open in 20 years at least. You know, like I always say, I don't know that it needs to be open now, but I want everything to be available to historians eventually.
Okay, I'll accept that. The MLK file. Okay, fine. But the Epstein files, do we really want to release? I mean, who knows what's in those files, and what kind of people they've talked to and why they talked to them and what other stuff could come out about it. I'm not sure that's a healthy thing in a free society.
Well, politics hates nuance, and we always say that if you can't answer something, and Trump lives in this world of bumper sticker politics, you know, it's where he lives and breathes. Um, so here's the problem: that his opponents can come out and say his name is in the files, you know, and then the files come out, and what do you know? His name is in the files. Now, of course, what the Justice Department would say, and anybody who's looked at him, they say, yeah, we looked at it. His name is in the files because his name's in Rolodex, and the name does appear somewhere in these giant, but it doesn't appear in the part. There is no like Rolodex of pedophiles where his name is listed. Yeah, you know. Um, but the problem is if you're already answering that question, you've already lost. And I think that Donald Trump and his supporters know that um, that if you're answering the question, why is your name on in the list? You know, why is your name quote unquote in the files? That's just not the conversation you want to be having.
So, Professor, though, let me. I'm surprised I want to drill into this, but and maybe one of the lawyers are going to rip into me, which is I want to hear this. If a if the FBI or any other agency investigates the IRS, any other agency is investigating a group of citizens who are freedom to assemble, and they're going to some island, and they're consenting adults, and they find nefarious activity that's then in the file, and they publish the nefarious or unseemly, not illegal, because they're consenting adults. And all of a sudden, we know that it can ruin character, it can ruin lives, it can ruin all sorts of stuff. Nothing's illegal, but it was in the file, and people are demanding we release the file. If it's underage women or girls or pedophilia, that's something else. But one of the civil libertarians among us even saying, well, even that, if it can't be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, we're still going to investigate you and then just release it anyway. To me, that the whole thing seems dangerous. The power of the federal government is really powerful. And if we just allow anybody, the new political elected official, to investigate his enemies and never file anything, but boy, will release the file. What? No, we don't want that in America. Am I wrong?
Well, there has to be some process about what's in the public's interest, and whatever it is, it's not going to be a perfect system. I can guarantee you that. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd leave it to Bart or Jeff to maybe come up with a better idea of what, you know, how to handle confidentiality of materials that are collected as part of a criminal investigation. You know, what should the process be for releasing that information to the public? But I just can't think of anything that wouldn't have problems. So I have no answers and no solutions, but maybe one of the
Could I
judges.
ask a clarification, Dr. Brackney, please?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, so what you're saying is there's the federal government or some aspect of it is investigating something, anything, right?
Gambling.
And so you feel like for that investigation to have to be done well, it needs to be kept from the public.
I'm saying that I want to protect the innocent, and in America, unless it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, you're innocent.
Okay. But see, so how do we get to determine who gets to determine that, right? So what I'm saying, especially in this day and age, John Brackney, in
No,
this
it's
day and age,
part
John
of a
Brackney.
judge and a jury, a
No,
district
no,
attorney.
but in this day and age, maybe a judge and a jury is something we want to think differently about, and would be a little radical here. But you could disseminate that information to the entire web, and we could decide as adults, citizens. I don't need some federal government to tell me what, to make a decision for me. I get to decide whether that information is something I care about, or
You're an Orwellian. You're a believer in George Orwell or The Handmaid's Tale.
I don't
you
know.
Scarlet letter on everyone. I mean,
No, but that's based on the presumption. You're assuming as a government or an entity that I, as a freestanding civil American with a brain in my head, can't make my own decision. Why I'm a citizen.
Yeah.
Our whole
His
system.
position is not Orwellian, it's libertarian. He's
What's
saying, Tony's position is libertarian, not Orwellian. He's saying take it completely out of the government's hands and put it in the hands of the individual to make his or her own assessment.
100% what he just said.
A rule democracy, not a rule of law constitutional republic.
Well, here's the problem as I see it, but again, I'll defer to Bart or Jeff if I'm getting this wrong, is that there is some kind of inherent right to privacy that individuals hold. Now, Epstein himself doesn't have it. He's been convicted of a crime, but people who've had information swept up as part of an investigation who haven't been convicted of a crime, they do have some right to privacy. Now, so what needs to be balanced somehow is the public interest versus the privacy rights of people who are mentioned in court files. So,
and Stephen,
I'm not discounting either position. I'm just saying, like,
yeah, I understand, Professor, and then Dr. Brackney. In this day and age, who has privacy? And with the kinds of, I'm talking to you on this camera, and this camera, although it's supposed to be private to us, everybody can hack into that. We don't have any privacy like we used to when they wrote the Constitution. The idea of privacy was very different than what we're experiencing today.
Yeah, but just because of the technology, it doesn't change the principle. That even though in a practical sense, we every day consent to give our privacy away, it doesn't mean that someone else gets to do that for us.
Good point. So
Sorry,
Tony,
I really want to get to Bart or Jeff on this though, because I know there's got to be some legal thing that I'm missing here.
jump in.
Okay, here, I'll jump in. John, I understand your question because I am a lawyer, and I believe in process. Okay. So what you're really arguing is that, the way we handle criminal stuff in this country is deliberations of a grand jury are secret and they're not revealed. And to be honest with you, I agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Having said that, I totally admit I'm not going to disagree. Don't worry. I think what's happened to the Jeffrey Epstein situation is that Donald Trump has painted himself into a political corner. He campaigned on releasing all this stuff. Now all of a sudden he's saying, "Oh God, I don't want to release it because of my name is in there." Well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I don't know what to say.
So, but to steal something from Professor Tootle, I'm a constitutional conservative, and the test of that is whether I'm willing to challenge against my own interest to protect the people that I don't necessarily want to protect. I don't want to protect Trump, but on the other hand, I want to protect everybody.
Right.
Well, that's why you always have to announce your own. I like this as an intellectual exercise that you're always supposed to announce that where you find your own limiting principle, as a test of your own intellectual honesty. And so if you can imagine that every single thing you do that's being captured on your phone is being sent to outer space and being hoovered up by the National Security Agency.
Probably is.
Yeah. How much of that information would you like to be made public? And you would have to begin with a premise to say, hold on, that would be wrong. Just because the NSA exists and it's out there protecting our national security, and they happen to gather up this information as part of their mission to protect national security, I still have, and they happen to gather up personal private information about me, I still have the right to privacy. I don't have
90% of people want to release the files on Epstein, Professor. 90% of people probably want to know what you're doing on your phone. So therefore, it's a vote. 90% want to do it, release it.
Yeah, I guess
I'm
I
bringing
just
you on
know
my
that
side.
somewhere between we release the private information of all Americans to we release no information, there's something in between there that involves a process that it's going to be imperfect and not going to make
And,
everybody.
and I'd like to challenge the patriarchal assumption of protection is necessary. I really want to look at this idea, John. You're supposed to protect me. You're fighting for my protection. Okay, I'm just going to take a second. I have a 23-year-old daughter, and when she was 7, there were horrible things happening in the world that I wished I could protect her from, but I couldn't. And when I didn't, she figured it out on her own. So why do you believe you need to filter me? Why what are you protecting me from? I want to see it all and I want to make the decision. And especially as it relates to this Epstein stuff, show it all to me and let me and every other human being who has a brain in their head decide what it means for them. Why do you want to protect me from making a decision with all the information I need?
Well, because we're not worried about protecting you, and we're not worried about protecting Epstein. We're worried about protecting people who are not you and who are not Epstein, that they still have some expectation of privacy.
But Stephen, I would say that's an illusion in this current culture. Privacy is an illusion.
It might be an illusion, but it's still a goal. It's still something.
I agree.
It's still a
I
right
agree.
that people have. Yeah.
So Tony, let me challenge you a bit. So if I don't know what's in the Epstein files, let's say it's 1,000 pages. So your argument is that you not only want the right, but are going to exercise the right to read all 1,000 pages, think carefully about it, and you believe that 330 million other people in the United States are also going to do that and come to a rational decision.
No, because this is where the rubber hits the road. First thing we need to do is look, what is the literacy rate? So in the United States, how many people could read it, right? Like there is that I mean, I think there's I don't know. It's some of the work I do is literacy.
Okay, make it 160 million people.
Right. So let's say it's 160 million people, and it'll be all, the Mueller report. I was like, I'm going to read that thing. I got a copy of it. It was free, and it sat on my desk. I didn't read it.
I did.
But I have it still to read, Jeff. And I should have. But I believe then the question becomes who has a right to have an opinion. They're like, hey, I read 5 pages and I now have an opinion. It's like, no, you got to read the whole thing. There's got to be some.
That's my point. None of those 160 million people are going to read the report.
Yeah.
They're going to find their neighbor is going to tell them, hey, this person lives, 3 blocks from you.
Yeah.
And they're in there. It's not really clear what they did, but obviously if they're in there, they did something wrong. And all of a sudden that person has just been convicted in the public sense. And nobody's spent any time. So I get you. If all 330 million people would be willing to fully inform themselves, then yeah, we could all be trusted with that, but that's not how we work.
And that's what Tootle Talks is really about. And this is the conversation. Since we've talked last time and we said the issue, more civics, right, Jeff, Steve, you and I talked about this, more civics, less politics.
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
civics, less politics. That's
Agreed.
the motto that I give to people. I want to talk civics with you, not politics. I don't care where you stand on politics. Let's talk civics.
So let me pose one thing to everybody and get your views on it, if I may.
We're almost out of time, so this will be one of the last postures.
All right, it's quick. I don't think actually anybody really wants the files released, because you're either against Trump and the belief, it's just like the stock market. The anticipation that he's in there is much stronger than whatever the reality is. I don't understand the other side, why Trump supporters want it released, other than that they want him to be consistent with what he said, but there's no upside. So maybe somebody can advise me on why that side of the equation wants him released. But I think actually nobody.
No, there's an easy answer on that. There's a significant portion of Trump supporters that truly believe there's a lot of evil men, particularly men, but
the cabal.
And they have gotten caught. And the file's there, and Trump was elected to fix this cabal of evil people in the world. I mean, that you can be perfectly authentic and believe in that. So I don't know.
And that's more important than if their guy is also in there as a
Professor Tootle's comments over the time. Most people probably don't even like Trump. They just happen to be carrying the banner of what they happen to believe in. And I think that's an authentic position to say that there's mean people doing bad things to other people and we should rout them out. I think that's authentic. And I don't want to protect those people. I just don't want to, if you're going to a gambling den, and private gambling, I think, is still illegal. I don't know. People do it all the time. Everybody does it. Maybe it's legal. I don't even know if it's gambling's illegal if you go and play poker with your neighbors. But if all of a sudden that's released, everybody you're not charged with a crime, but you're released. Same with prostitution you can just go through the whole pornography. You can go through the whole litany of things that are unseemly. But boy, you could just ruin everybody's life in America by revealing what they don't, abortion, either way, or gays, either way, or gun ownership, either way. You can just take whatever you don't like, release it, and say, yep, those are the gun owners. Those are the owners.
All good arguments for a privacy amendment.
Yeah, we need a constitutional amendment on privacy. Thank you for that. There's 2 of us. Professor Tootle, we are over time. Wrap us up.
I don't know. Be nice. Go swimming. I don't have a good final wrap up. See you next week.
Sure you said that it's the same thing you said last Friday in different words. It is fragile, and every one of us need to be fighting every day to protect rights, to protect people we disagree with. I mean, when we talk about freedom of speech, it's just not my ability to say something stupid. It's the allow somebody else to say something stupid. Maybe not on my Facebook page, but they should be able to say it in their own home or even the public square. So wrap what we should do as citizens up in a nice little bundle for us, and so we can move on with our day.
Well, to keep it on a positive tip on something that I've just been thinking about is that in many states, flagship universities are starting new institutions for civic education. And I'm very interested in many of these, and I hope that they succeed, and I hope that they become permanent. And but don't think that the battle is won just because a center exists at your flagship university. That civic education really needs to be a bigger part of the permanent curriculum of every student, not just in high school, but also in college. So I'm encouraged by these new centers, but there's still much work to be done.
Okay. We're going to end with that. Professor, sure appreciate your time. Hope you're enjoying your summer.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, thanks for your time today. This was an interesting group discussion. Thank you very much for that. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.